What we're sitting in today is a just north of 200,000 square foot office building that was 30% vacant. It's 13 stories. There was a pathway to getting to 50% vacancy. It was at 30. If we could remove another 20% and get it to approximately 100,000 square feet of vacancy, we were going to convert those floors. You'd have maintain the retail at the podium, second floor residential, third floor commercial office, fourth floor commercial office, 2 floors of residential, flip back to commercial.
How is that going to work?
There's always a way. It's just time and money, right?
From my perspective, you developed a brand of high quality and the ability to take on very difficult projects and perform them successfully.
We have carved out a niche or kind of a position in the adaptive reuse market or conversion space. There's just something about seeing something that was there today and transforming it into something different for tomorrow.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
All right, Master Keys podcast. We were back. This is an on-location episode, which I'm very excited about.
I don't think we've ever done one of these.
Haven't we? No,
we did everything downtown. We had a studio downtown. This is the first time where we just ripped everything out of my studio, brought it to site. I think it hooked up pretty good.
Yeah, we might have a little bit of reverb because we're in a space here. We're on a construction site, and we're here with our boy Elliot McNeil.
Yeah.
Super excited about this. Neil, do you want to describe this space before we kind of...
Yeah, I can try to describe this space. So this was a building in downtown Halifax that was an office tower for the longest time. I remember it growing up. It's right in the dead center of downtown. And I remember hearing about it being for sale around the start of COVID. And I was like, oh, that's a cool building. That could be an interesting building to either do some sort of conversion or something. And then sure enough, within a few months, I remember seeing it on the news, closed and sold to somebody that I didn't know yet, but I knew through extension by Chandler. And that's Elliot. And
had to have been a crazy person.
Yeah, exactly. There had to be someone who was clean off their rocker that's willing to get into this. And so now he's come through here and ripped it all to pieces. And now he's built these beautiful units. So if you're just listening, take a look at the videos. I'll post some stuff on my story. They're going to do a bunch of promo, but it's nice in here. These are cool units, big windows. It's hard to imagine when you walk through an office space. We just did, and it's epic, man. What you've done here is epic. So with that, I'm going to say hello to Elliot. Thank you for coming on. We've been wanting to do this for a long time.
Yeah.
I think we initially talked about this when you were doing another conversion that was a hotel in downtown Dartmouth, the old Super 8, which was another really savvy buy. And the cool thing I always thought about that place was the balconies. Right. Not many hotels have balconies in general, but those are really good, spacious balconies. I haven't actually seen
inside that one before you bought it.
Okay. Everyone's seen the penthouse in that unit before, haven't they?
Neil used to hang on the Super 8 a little.
The penthouse has a 5,000 square foot patio.
Yeah.
I remember it's this massive patio. I think I saw the unit. Did you built in
a lot of bachelor parties happen there, I think. We'll leave it at that.
Those walls could talk. There's some extra demo
required. I was in that unit because I moved to Halifax and that's where we stayed.
Did you touch the furniture?
I tried not to.
Good,
the carpets and the furniture were a little sticky.
Good.
He still has the rash. I think but before we get started, it's interesting for context. You were talking about, back in 2020, 2021, this was before people were really talking about conversions the way they talk about conversions now. Whether it's CMHC or just the federal government, there's been this big thing of, we need to do more office conversions. I can't stress enough, it wasn't a sexy, cool idea back in 2020, 2021 during COVID to buy office space. The trend was completely away from office space from an actual traditional lease it as office idea, and people hadn't really bought into the conversion. So I think that's a really cool foresight. But before we get into that, Elliot, do you want to give us a little background on your personal story and kind of where you came from and where you're at now, sort of really high level?
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, and thanks for having me. It took a while, but
we made it happen.
Yeah, we made it happen over time. Our people. Yeah, so I've been here in the city for 25 years, I believe, this year. Originally from Cape Breton, proud Cape Bretoner. Very lucky to have grown up the way I did. Rural Cape Breton. It instills certain values, I believe, in who you are, coming from the countryside.
Whereabouts in Cape Breton?
Oh, sorry. Technically, Kingsville, Cape Breton is the name. And you will pass through that very quickly on the Trans-Canada.
Yeah, I have a vague recollection of seeing it on a green sign, but not
it's between Cancel Causeway and Waikagama.
I know exactly.
That's the best way to describe it. Most people hang a left to Cabot, but if you head up the center, that's where I'm too.
I'll watch for it when I go to Bedeck for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So I think that was, growing up there and being exposed to a way of country living and growing up, I was exposed to construction and machinery and having to do things yourself. And, both of the grandparents on both sides were very entrepreneurial. They lived off the land. They had lumber mills and they did pulp work and fishing, all the typical things to put food on the table. But they were very entrepreneurial at the end of the day. And I as much as I loved the island, I think it's most kids' dreams to get off of the island. So I really wanted to pursue, believe it or not, a career. I didn't want to follow the typical kind of construction future that most do. They used to head to Boston, then everyone started migrating to Fort McMurray.
Yep.
I wanted to go to Boston, coincidentally,
Really? Okay.
but for a different reason. My education is actually in communications design and marketing. So the internet was coming on in the late 90s. I wanted to pursue this. This was the new frontier.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to do a 180 from what all my friends were doing and pursue that. Unfortunately, I couldn't complete my internship in the United States because of the whole Green Card, all those challenges.
Right. Okay.
So I reluctantly ended up in Halifax, believe it or not, to work for free for my internship, and started in the film industry and worked for a really great company here called Top Sail Entertainment. And what we did was we created the look and feel for all of these different television projects and product that was sold around the world. So from the early days, I was very creative. I had a design influenced kind of education and background, and ended up building a network really quickly here and fell in love with the city really quickly. And it became my home. So early 2000s, probably year 2 of being here, year 3, I was early 20s. I bought my first condo, and I remember saving up the $7,000 to buy this thing.
Nice.
Where was it?
Yeah.
What's that? It was across from Jenny's Pub on Lady Hammond Road.
John Parr.
It was beside John Parr, same developer.
I know the one you mean. Yeah.
It was, you know what?
I'm still in there. Those are nice units.
Yeah.
They're kind of like
They're 2-story townhouses.
Yeah.
I saved up $7,000. I renovated the hell out of it and did all the work myself. I brought my dad in to do tiling for an entire week. And he said, Elliot, I love you to death, but if you have more of these in mind, I can't break my back over this. It's not worth it. So anyway, $7,000. I put $20,000 in renovations and sold it in 7 months and made $40,000.
Nice.
So it was a good lift. And I realized that I knew a little bit of what I would do, and there was an opportunity there, and I should do it again. So quickly, then I got into a single family home, and I got into duplexes. Then I started building crazy additions on other homes. What I really did was, after 3 or 4, was start to get very familiar with the planning rules for the city.
Yeah.
I did a variety of projects around the city, from the north end to the south end, and started buying. Actually, before I bought in downtown Dartmouth, which is where I have my love affair and where I am very focused on our neighborhood development strategy as a company, I found between 2010 and 2014, I got very familiar with the planning regime of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I searched high and low in Spryfield. I was really going to focus. I wanted to niche down. And I realized almost like some buried terms within how downtown Dartmouth planning worked.
The old DN zoning?
The old as of right. I was looking for as of right opportunities, but in a very small scale.
Mm-hmm.
How can I add another unit? How can I add 2 units? They always had a parking ratio. It was very restrictive, very restrictive to develop back then. And anyway, long story short, I found an as of right zoning for up to 24 units in downtown Dartmouth on a specific bid. It was all of downtown Dartmouth.
Right.
And I realized, the development community is very hungry, and they're always curious what's happening in different areas. And I decided to keep quiet on what I had found and what I was doing, and didn't overshare what I was doing and what I found. And that was my jumping off point to Dartmouth and how we ended up there today. And essentially, we started acquiring as much property as we could in that area. And to be honest, the planning has just gotten better and better and better and more. Yeah, it's been completely reimagined for the better.
I remember when we first kind of crossed paths, or when I first heard about you even, and finding out, I remember hearing that he's from Cape Breton and his background is in marketing. And that made sense to me, because even when you're doing, quite large projects, but in hindsight, compared to what we're in here today, relatively small, they were always rolled out really nicely. Like the pitch of the project themselves, which now we take for granted, but at the time, people weren't rolling out projects with the promotion and with the vision that they do now, right? That's kind of come from bigger markets. Back then, it's like you didn't even really know what the building was going to look like until it was done. And if there was some rendering, it was a pretty mediocre rendering. And it wasn't community focused. It wasn't branded. And I credit you as one of the first people to actually brand buildings and sell this vision, where even if it was something like a 16 to 24 unit, it still felt like well considered and it felt exciting and vibrant and special. So I think part of your marketing. And then you realize early on in this, if you're trying to go from here to another level up, you need to be able to sell the dream, whether it's to partners, to lenders, to your trades, to eventual tenants. And a marketing background isn't actually the worst one to have for something like that.
Totally. Just to go back to the story. So during this time of looking for larger and larger scaling sites and bigger projects, what were you doing for cash flow? Were you, because I feel like I've seen your name on homes, commercial spaces. What all's going on there? Where's the money been coming from?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Because that is really a transitioning point for many, right?
Yeah.
You can stay small or smaller. You really need to decide, what do you want? Because it can be a side hustle. It can be a main focus. And
it can be a mom and pop.
It could be mom and pop. Or you can go all in a big way. And really it's about team and the capital.
Yeah.
So to go back to your point, so I built an ad agency business here, a digital marketing firm in the city, and for almost 10 years. So real estate was a side hustle for me.
No way. Okay.
So all of those projects I outlined were after hours projects.
Okay.
So yes, I had built a team, was very focused on building this company for 10 years. What I realized over time was, upon reflection, as much fun as I was having, where is the wealth creation really coming from? And what is the succession plan of this other business? It was very difficult to find the right leaders in that organization. And in the marketing world here in the city, you need to have the big contracts. You need to have the Bell Alliant $5 million contract. You need to have the Eastlink, the NSLC, the tourism. There's only a dozen of them to go around. But if you don't have one of those, you can't rely on that cash flow and predict and forecast and hire and invest. It doesn't work. You're chasing $20,000, $50,000 projects all the time. It's just, it's death by 1,000 cuts. So I woke up one day and said, you know what? I need to make a change. And was fortunate enough to have already been the company 2 years before I left, was partially acquired by a bigger group of companies. So it was an easy exit for me when the time came up, because it was part of a larger group of companies that took it over. So I decided I'm going to be a developer. This is easy, right? I just finished 10 or 12 projects. It's so easy. So I bought a piece of land in Purcell's Cove and was going to build this custom home, and almost actually could have lost everything right with that project alone. I remember I found it on Viewpoint.
There was like a lot of rock.
It was a whale watching company. It was a mountain. So basically it was a cliff, but it had this beautiful government wharf almost on the arm, right? It was at the mouth of the harbor. I thought, Jesus, it was listed for $169. And I told the guy, like, you've been trying to sell this for 3 years. No one's going to buy this. You need to basically own a civil company to
get through this.
To start the groundwork here. So I picked it up for $80,000. And I thought, look at this. I got this incredible piece of property. It's the dream. I can have a boat, and then I went and tried to get sewer and water approved and was told no 3 times. Therefore, I could have lost that investment, or should have started another whale watching company probably. But essentially, I was told no 3 times. I wasn't going to be able to develop anything on this piece of property. So luckily, the 4th person I talked to was a bit of a cowboy, or had a little more imagination than the others. But it cost me $250,000 to put sewer and water on this site. We had to blast a road up the face of this mountain to then put a sloping sand filter system, sewer on the top of the mountain.
You got to pump it all.
I'm talking, there was ropes. Like you had to use ropes to navigate this. I went to view the property. You moved from rope to rope to get up the face of this thing. Anyway, long story short, developed a really cool contemporary property there with in-ground pool with 180 views of the arm, and was able to exit and sell that. But that was the beginning. That was the beginnings. I made very little money on it.
Okay, but you got out of it.
I got out of it.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
And someone got a nice house. That's all.
Yeah.
Someone got great,
Couple
great house
realtors
and I
got
was able
paid,
to move
hopefully.
on. Yeah.
Couple
Very cool septic
agents got
system.
paid, hopefully.
But it was
Lord
during
willing.
I was actually in a pretty significant cash flow bind when I owned that.
I can
When I
imagine.
had that home, I was living in another expensive home. I was trying to build this expensive home. I had just bought 2 other properties. I had just left a company. Now, by the way, going back a number of years when I was still working, it was a side gig. I don't know if you guys were buying property back then, but the banks didn't talk to one another. So I think I had like 4 first-time home mortgages on the go.
Right, yeah.
That's amazing.
Right?
I love it.
Literally
I
the
love it.
systems didn't
playing
talk.
the game.
There wasn't,
Yeah.
and I had my own business. I remember writing myself a letter to say, I make this much money and giving it to the bank.
Yeah.
It was insane. It didn't make any sense, but that really allowed me to acquire the amount of property I did earlier. And anyway, so here we are. I'm building this custom property and I have no income.
And did you have any staff at that point, or were you just project
No.
managing, but it all subs? Because at some
Correct.
point you
I
converted
was
to
boots on the ground.
Yeah.
On all of these projects. I was actually on almost all the prior projects. I did everything except for drywall and roofing. So I had to frame windows, doors, tearing out the structural floors, rebuilding.
Do you mean
all new
physically?
choices? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it. That was like reliving my childhood of
Yeah.
needing to build your own home or needing to build the cottage or help
Yeah.
the neighbor with his garage. Or,
Yeah. At some point, though, you started to build out the construction company, which
Yes.
I think did that to some degree keep the lights on. If it Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I was already into some units. Yeah, I was doing some duplexes, triplexes also on the side, but I was also in the process of liquidating some of these properties to generate the capital I would require to actually jump into development for full time.
Right.
But I didn't have millions in cash ready to go. I was trying to liquidate smaller stuff, and here I am spread trying to do larger projects. But then I started getting calls. Can you help? Can you renovate this? Can you build this? And I started saying yes. And I just started utilizing the network of trade partners and whatnot that I had already established from doing my other projects. And you know what? This sounds impossible today when I think about it, but I was the project manager and I was the site superintendent, but I was doing probably 3 projects at a time. We converted a really cool building on Cornwallis to film studios. I'm saying we, it was I, but me, myself and the team of trade partners, because I eventually built a team, and then we converted a brownstone building on Barrington, that was my first historic kind of project, converted that to 7 units from a single family. But they were all complex projects. Everything I had touched was technical and complex and infill based or historic heritage product, or just very unique and complicated in their nature.
And so I want to ask you about that because, that's all under the Bruno brand?
Yes. So I realized taking on these 3 projects, I cannot do this. This is not sustainable.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I created income in addition to my other smaller passive stuff. But I really realized I need a construction company. The other reality was I couldn't find the right size GC to help me with the projects that we were working on. I needed a smaller to medium sized kind of owner operator GC. And there was just less to choose from back then. And so what I did was hire my first site superintendent to run one of those sites. And then I realized I got to delegate the project management because, to be honest, I was not qualified as a project manager as we got into larger projects.
Mm-hmm.
Project manager is a loose term that's thrown around often.
Yeah.
But when you get into serious projects, it really means something. Residential is very different than commercial and larger high-rise development, of course. So I slowly started building a team in 2013, and it started with one person and it grew. And, within a couple of years, I had 20 some carpenters. We were almost self-performing all of our own work. But I made that decision to build another company and take everything I'd learned in the years before and apply the important things to what it takes to lead a great company. And that is, it starts with a team and being people focused before profit. And that was the approach I took. And so today, yes, there's a Bruno group of companies. Bruno is my first name, actually, which is another funny story for another day, maybe. But so within the Bruno group or the Bruno family of companies, we have Bruno Builders, which is a commercial GC here in the city. We focus on retail, restaurant, corporate office, and small to medium-sized multifamily builds, but it does not interact or conduct any of the construction work for our development projects. So Bruno Builders is the GC. We have Sidewalk, Red, or Sidewalk Real Estate Development, which is the developer arm of the business. And they are focused on the acquisition, everything from ideation and acquisition all the way through to the point where the first consultants are awarded within the process of the development. And then it gets handed over to our next sister company, which is Black and Brew. Black and Brew is a small but mighty construction management company completely focused on multifamily development.
So
They don't
larger
touch-
scale than the Bruno stuff, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It is all development projects, primarily for our own in-house pipeline, but also for select third-party projects.
Got it.
Yeah. So collectively, so there's 3 companies in the group. There's just over 50 staff, and I'm so lucky to work with them every day. It's incredible. You asked me on the way in here today, man. You know,
Yeah. So are you living
are
here?
you
Are
sleeping? Are
stressed?
you
Yeah,
living
yeah.
here? Are you stressed? And I told you, no, I lost my hair a long time ago on smaller projects. To be honest, I've been so lucky to build a team, but it has taken 10 years.
Yeah,
It has taken 10 years to get it right. And we still are learning every day. But no, I have the luxury of popping in on this beautiful, incredible, sizable project once a month. It's all about the people and the systems in the process.
Yeah, that's wild that you can
Yeah.
be. So I don't want to say hands off because that downplays it more than it is, right? But to not be in there, getting bogged down in the detail is kind of everything.
You got it.
What were the principles for you in establishing like Bruno? And then, like you said, you ended up with a lot of these unique, difficult projects. Like, was that by design? Is that because that's what interested you? Or like
No one else wanted them.
nobody else wanted them? Or because you've, from my perspective, you developed a brand of high quality and the ability to take on very difficult projects and perform them successfully. And like, was that what you wanted, or did you fall into that? And I guess what principles were in your head? Like you said, it's a people-focused business, but even at the start when it was predominantly you, like, was it a desire to do unique and do it really, really well? Or what was kind of the idea there?
Great question. We have carved out a niche or kind of a position in the adaptive reuse market or conversion space. And ever since my first renovation, there was just something about seeing something that was there today and transforming it into something different for tomorrow. And I just didn't get excited the same way about looking at a piece of greenfield land.
Yeah.
I always looked at something and imagined what could it be.
Yeah.
And so it goes all the way back to that little condo I did a long time ago. Now it just happens to be 200,000 square foot office buildings and churches and hotels and industrial buildings. But that's really the way I was able to apply the creative vision that I would have that was maybe borrowed from who I was younger in my younger years.
Yeah.
I'm just applying it to what we do today. But yes, we've definitely carved out a niche for ourselves in that space. Now, new construction is still very important to us too, and a good portion of our pipeline is new construction for the years to come. But you mentioned brand a few times. Brand is so important to me, and brand is really about the personality. What is the personality of that project? The personality of that suite that somebody's going to live in. What is the story? Because I think that's such an important place to start with a project. And brand is not coming up with the name of the building and applying the sign.
Yeah.
And naming it after one of your kids. That's okay. And I believe in that. And I've been asked to do that in the past. But it is really about understanding, where something came from and where it's going, and developing a story that people can relate to and connect with. And I know you're going to ask me about what I believe the future of the market is here and what's happening and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to location and personality of the product.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to go with that if we go there. I just think it's important to note that's really important to us, and we will overinvest in that maybe compared to another developer, because the ROI for us happens in a different way.
I was going to sort of turn it specifically to this building just for a quick question. With
Sure.
this. So explain to the listener here the scope of this project here, square footage, original use, and end product.
Sure. So what we're sitting in today is a just north of 200,000 square foot office building that was 30% vacant when we originally looked at this project 3 years ago, or this deal. It's 13 stories. It's a 70s built building that was built in 2 phases. I believe the first phase was either late 60s or early 70s, and then they added an additional phase beside the building and connected them maybe a few years later. It was formerly a commercial office building, corporate office use. Lots of people also have stories of having connected with this building in some way. And so our original vision was, this was an off-market deal, or it was just shopped kind of exclusively. And we were just coming off of we were in a bit of an acquisition spree, and it piqued our interest, to be honest. We weren't targeting office assets at the time.
At that point, you had done the new build on King. You had done some smaller scale kind of commercial with residential above an office, and you had done the theater lofts then, or had you done the hotel? What was the order?
We were about to start the hotel.
Okay, but you had done the Bell lofts?
Hotel lofts was completed. Okay. Yes. Yeah. That was a very technical, extensive conversion and addition. We put a 70-story wood addition on top of a 30-story brick and concrete podium.
30 foot.
What did I say?
Story. 70 stories.
So many people talking about 30 stories.
Story building,
It's a 100-foot building with 70% of it that's wood on top of the concrete.
And it's very cool looking.
And that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
8.
So then you had acquired this. How many square feet are we in here?
200,000?
Just north of 200,000 square feet. So our initial vision for this project, our strategy was, there was a pathway to getting to 50% vacancy. It was at 30. So if we could remove another 20% and get it to approximately 100,000 square feet of vacancy, we were going to convert those floors. It's amazing looking back at the basic massing of how we were going to do this, but we were going to be skipping floors. So you'd have maintain the retail at the podium, second floor residential, third floor commercial office, fourth floor commercial office, 2 floors of residential, flip back to commercial.
How is that going to work? You were just showing us all the new stacks that had to be cut in and everything. Like,
there's a way. There's a way. There was a pathway.
Someone sit in their cubicle.
But it would be more complicated than what we are doing today. Yeah. There's always a way. It's just time and right, and the size of your nads, really, right? Yeah. And so anyway, that was the initial intent. The initial strategy was to convert half the building. That was our first foray into any real scale of de-tenanting a building. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, my partner at Sidewalk, Joe, comes from a large institutional real estate asset management and development firm in Toronto, and they worked on a lot of corporate office assets and refurbishing old buildings, upgrading them from Class C to Class A. Mm-hmm. So he had experience with de-tenanting, and I will tell you, that is the number one obstacle in this type of project is, how do we work the leases?
Yeah. This is the thing that I've come across with even the small scale multi. No one likes that word, rent eviction. But it is incredibly difficult to do this scope of work to a building with anyone in it. Like, let alone 50%, whatever. If you've got this building down to 10%, because now you still have some tenants here, working around them is...
I just toured you a live government office tenant.
Yeah, it's so weird to think that we're in the same space as them.
We're in a finished suite. Doesn't have furniture in it, but we're in a model suite without furniture. And I just toured you a government office on the few floors up. Yeah. Imagine removing asbestos for 7 months in a building that was 50% occupied. So we could do a podcast on this building, to be honest.
Totally. I was just thinking that.
And
but what's the end result going to be?
Sorry. Yes, the finished picture of this building is 173 units. Wow. So the initial strategy was 80. And the reality with these buildings is that a lot of things move and change after you've committed to a plan. Yeah. So the way you finance it, you need to keep your financing flexible. So I just told you earlier, if we had locked in CMHC on this project from inception,
be hooped.
We would have been down a completely different path. I don't even want to go there, right? But with a partner like BMO on board and taking the educated risk with us to say, we see your plan, we see your path, and we got to get creative together to make this happen. But in hindsight, and they'll tell you today, they would do these deals all day long now. Because in the beginning, it looks like a decrepit office building.
Yeah.
And you're losing tenants.
Yeah.
It's not good. How's that going to work? But when you really think about it, you have cash flow to manage the detenanting while you're ramping up for permitting and construction. So anyway, there's a lot of good that goes into it as well.
I was going to add to that a couple things. As you mentioned about the vacancy, the difference for some of you guys listening, again, this was office building. So it's not residential evictions, it's commercial, which there's no tenancy board. And some of these people might have 5 or 10 year leases. So it's not as simple as being able to boot them out. And if there's no demolition clause or development clause within their commercial lease, you can't boot them out. You've guaranteed them a space for 10 years. You can go and beg and plead and cry or try and buy them out. Or they might realize that being inside of a construction site is absolute hell and move, but it's probably more difficult than a residential space.
At least when they vacate en masse though, right? Like you could move a tenant out and gain 2 floors and stuff like that.
You could technically, yeah, totally. But I think that's something worth considering in it. And then also to your point, going to the bank for 80 units worth of financing. I'm like, kidding, we need 173 units.
Yeah, it's more than double.
Yeah. And that cash flow we were going to get from keeping half the building, that's now gone. We're going to get rid of those.
And I mean, we wouldn't be able to do a project like this without the incredible investor relations we have. And we had to raise a significant amount of capital to do this project. We had a 90-day due diligence on this project, and started with 60. We can talk about it today about, how do you possibly identify the blind spots in that short amount of time?
Yeah.
And I think we extended to we closed this thing within 100 days and had to raise $9 million. I mean, that's
cheapers.
Let's say, had you secured your investor pool?
A lot of things got to fall into place for that to happen. Did I secure
prior to coming into this? Did you know who you were going to go to, or was it like, okay, all right, good, yeah, like this is the project I'm going to put together?
Dust off that marketing.
You know what? Yeah, no, just
baby.
Many years of building incredible relationships and building trust with everyone I know, and having a track record, knowing that this was the next
evolution.
The evolution, the next step for us coming out of our other, almost 100,000 square foot projects.
If you can just hone down on it in a couple sentences or less, why conversions? Why not residential renovation? Why not new construction? Why conversions?
Why not residential renovation?
Well, if these are the alternatives, right? You can either convert an office space like this.
Mm-hmm.
You could, in theory, take a residential project and completely renovate it.
If you can find them.
Or if you could, or build from scratch.
Well, obviously there's something to start with. So the idea of building the Roy across the street gives me a sick feeling in my stomach. The idea of removing a building and excavating a site in the downtown core of Halifax without the appropriate parcel of land to actually have access and lay down space, like Louis' project down the street. I mean, wow, it's unbelievable what has to go into those projects. So first and foremost, I would just say adaptive reuse is about reusing. Mm-hmm. The more you need to be able to reuse the components of the building. The more you strip away, you're starting to tread in the direction of I should have just tore it all down and gone into new construction. So, there's so many pros, cons, tips, tricks. But I would say this goes back to us being able to see the possible within something that exists. It's about identifying something, identifying whether it's viable quickly or not. For us, it's about saving time. And this just happens to be a category of work we're very heavily invested in right now. But it's not easy to find these assets. Mm-hmm. We would do more all day long, but it's taken years and years and years of building the skill set and the tools in-house to be able to complete the due diligence required early to make sure you don't lose it all. I mean, these are humongous risks. But once you've proven a skill set there, just like anything, you become better and better at it. So all we saved in this building essentially was the majority of the envelope and the structure.
Concrete.
We wanted to save all of it. We're looking at the risers. Yes, we would want to keep as much as we could. And you need to fight for that. But you also need to weigh that against what are the CapEx risks later.
Yeah.
What happens when something rots out and it's buried and it, you
should have kept that carpet on the office floor.
Yeah. We'll reuse it somewhere else. Yeah.
To that point, what do you think was, like, you keep kind of alluding like the skill set that you built over time, looking at you specifically versus, let's say, the company, what do you think was your strongest asset as a skill, or like getting from building that house in Purcell's Cove to now you're sitting inside of a tower in the downtown of the city with 200 units in it? Like, what do you think helped you get there? You alluded to big nads. Like there's all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is it? The branding, is it the marketing, is it people experience?
It's two things. It's people. It's building teams first and foremost. Without the resources, you just simply can't scale into anything large. So I would say it's the ability to create followers. It is to be able to lead and focus 75% of your day on finding people and retaining people and motivating people and leading people. Believe it or not, if you want to do this at scale, these aren't a one-off, right? We especially speaking from my experience today.
And you enjoy that?
I am more passionate about that than anything.
I think that's key because you said early on what you liked. You're like, man, this was nostalgic to your youth and feeling like I'm doing something, I'm building something. But at some point, you have to put the tools down. And a lot of people, it's like a lot of people who are in the trades, like if they genuinely like framing houses, they often don't ever build a construction company. They just frame houses until their body gives out on them. So you have to like the people management to do it at scale.
Yeah. It is all about the team you have, and you're always working that team. You're always practicing. You can use 100 sports analogies, right? But it couldn't be more closer to the truth. The other factor that is the game changer is the ability to raise capital. That is because real estate is not a one-man thing. You got a one-person thing. It takes more than one. You need to have the team, and you need to have the capital, and you need to have some vision. And so I think, but when you put those three together, that is the ingredients to the game-changing moment.
I want to hone in on the team thing for a quick second, just selfishly. What do you think in building a team and having that go successfully? What do you think like the number one attribute to that is? Is it being able to inspire your people, or like just being able to select really good people, or going through like just spending, like you said, a ton of time going through a ton of different people? What do you think contributes to building a really good team? A great team in this case.
I mean, COVID is such an interesting time because it just disrupted the entire world in so many ways. And it really shook up the people space, right?
Yeah.
Everybody reflected on what they were doing, whether they enjoyed it, where their future was going to be. And through that, we've, for several years now, been the employer is no longer in control of that hiring process.
Yeah.
It is up to the individual to find out what makes them happy, what drives them, what brings them joy, what are they truly passionate about. And so it's not as easy as just going and finding the people and saying, hey, you're a great project manager or construction manager. You really need to have a vision as to where you're going, and it needs to be exciting, and it needs to be big and hairy and audacious, and you need to have a track record. It's not too dissimilar than somebody writing $1 million check to say, I believe in you. The same is true for creating more followers or building that team and finding really great people that are happy elsewhere. There's something missing, and they're open to participating in something bigger or more creative or more entrepreneurial or something that is aligning better with who they are and where they're going in life. Post-COVID, I mean, a lot of people moved around. A lot of people are happy where they are now.
Yeah.
Compensation has changed.
Yeah.
Employers have realized culture is all of a sudden really important. And culture is not an overnight thing. Culture starts with your values, and it really is about, it's a feeling. When you walk through that door, right? And when you work with your coworkers, how are you feeling? What are all the touch points all day long with everyone? It's really a special thing.
It's funny. I think you can draw some parallels between what you're saying about your staffing kind of goals, which are to retain and to focus on like forward looking, what could be, and kind of conversions, right? It's about retention and kind of seeing this vision moving forward. So I think that's a curious parallel between what you are passionate about doing in your actual business and what you seem to be passionate about in what you build, which is kind of taking something that is and just rebranding it and reimagining it and having this vision moving forward.
And so
the name talking about that, it was reminiscent of that.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. And the brand, just to answer part of the question from earlier, the brand name or the building name of this project we're in today is the Agency Art Lofts. And so agency is
your kid's name Agency?
Nice one.
Little agencies all grown up.
Yeah. So if you go back to the Mad Men era of what this place looked like and felt like in the 70s, I mean, dudes hacking darts with suits
Yeah,
on at
whiskey,
their desks,
yeah,
right? And you had, I won't get into all the details, but all of the craziness that occurred in the corporate office culture back then. So that was a jumping off point for us. So then we've utilized that in how we are creating the building identity within. It's how the wayfinding works. It's how the wall deckling and visuals work when you walk off elevators. It's how your suite doors are designed. It's how the bathroom wall graphics are working. It's all going to connect to the exterior visual elements that tie into the brand. Anyway, we've created some really cool.
Yeah, those are the intangible elements. Like, and we're going to, towards the end of this chat, we're going to talk about where we see the market going. And I think some of that nuance, that attention to detail, that creating a vibe for, to use a very millennial term, I think is going to matter in a more competitive rental market space. But if you could look up some...
Can I touch on the vibe thing real quick? How much of that are you engaged in the branding aspect? Because I feel like that's something you love. Again, you said you got educated in it. You've done really well. And since the start, even when you were independent, you were huge on it and were super successful. Is that something that you're heavily involved in now?
Yes.
To make sure you see that vision come through?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, really, really great partners at this point in how we develop the brand work for our projects. But yes, that is a very exciting aspect of a project for me. It is those early days.
Like you just love that part.
It is that early days vision. It's that story,
It's
right?
so fun.
And then actually to see it execute, it feels just as good as walking in one of these suites when the vision starts to come together. It is so satisfying and yeah.
So say there's someone out there that's full of piss and vinegar and thinks, I want to try conversion as well.
Don't. No.
First of all, stay out of my lane. Like, what are some things that you look for in a good potential conversion project? Like a building that would lend itself well or be easily adapted to a conversion?
Absolutely most difficult space you can possibly find.
Yes, I think
more asbestos.
Yeah. I mean, those are the details that you can kind of work through. But we talked about the tenancy of a building. I think what is the track to vacancy? That is if you're locked into 5-10 year leases right out of the gate. Yeah. Well, I guess that comes down to what your investment strategy is, but we would not want to hold on to a building for 10 years before we conduct construction. So that would be one of the top three. Another one is just the code related challenge that come with these buildings and conversions, because a residential use is much different than a corporate office use or a commercial use.
Saying nothing for the change in times, right? Because like this was a 70s building. So even if you had remodeled this as a current office building, you would jam up with all kinds of code stuff. But then you take that to the next degree when you're talking residential.
Yeah. So the envelope is a really important component of a building. The more you can save there and the less you need to remove and rebuild, the better. It is about the going in price. You need to ensure that your acquisition price is reflective of the total construction costs. And it's considering the total construction costs. And that then goes down into another decision tree where we wouldn't be able to do this with a general contracting partner. We conduct all of our own in-house construction. Construction is a freight train. And if you slow down that train to make a change, to change directive on site, something that happens with financing, if you want to imagine if we had to move from 80 units to 173, or it actually changed in between there. It was going to be 80, then it was going to be 140. So there's a lot of moving parts. If you don't have the agility to bob and weave, and you slow down that freight train like a big GC, it just takes so much momentum to get going again. And that's an example of our margin would be eliminated with working with a larger GC on a project like this. There's just so many moving parts. But there are important factors that you need to look for in these projects. And there continues to be blind spots. There will always be blind spots on these projects. But the more experience you have and you gain, you learn on every project. We feel very well suited to take on multiple projects like this now at scale. Unfortunately, the asset class is not as transactional as you would think.
And this is the other thing. I mean, the government, if you listen to anything released by CMHC or the government, they're like, oh, there's all these empty office buildings everywhere. We should just be converting these to residential. And they make it sound like it's one, readily available, and two, very easy to do. You're saying that's not the case? Is that?
It's just so easy to walk by an office building and think no one's in that. Why don't we create housing?
It's empty space.
Right.
So the average person is going to continue to think that until they really understand how technical it is, the challenges, the fact that that office building across from us may have to cover all of the window openings on one side of the building because it's too close to the building next to it. It's fine today as a corporate office. The minute you convert that to residential and apply for a building for a building permit to residential, and they tell you you need to enclose an entire side of the building, that's dangerous. That can
we can't see this, but
end you.
Essentially, you have like these 12 or even maybe 12-foot openings by 6 foot high. They're essentially a sheer glazing, and that would need to be shrunk down, presumably for fire, right? That's their rationale.
It's called limiting distancing, but the distance you are from a neighboring building, it's a fire rating requirement. We talked about the need for adding operable windows in an office building. That's not, if you don't have the right project team that understands this, you don't hire an architect that's done this before, there's blind spots for everyone.
These
And
massive glazing things were
if you find these things out after you buy the building,
You're screwed.
yeah, you can be done pretty quick.
So in terms
That's
of
why, sorry.
it's in terms of value calculation.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
You said you had gone to Alberta. All right. What happened there? I remember we spoke probably a year or two ago now, and because that was like the epicenter of empty office space for Canada was Alberta. And they also had an incentive. The government was giving out $50 a square foot, I think it was, towards conversions. $70 a square foot.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Well, so we were mid-construction here, I believe, in this project. So to walk into a market like that and truly see empty office buildings with an incentive to convert them. And by the way, the cost base again, and I think this is what we shared.
Yeah.
There was a 200,000 square foot office building, I believe, that was sent to me. I believe we shared this conversationally, but the going in cost was $70 a square foot. That's what they were selling these buildings at.
Yep.
You asked why, like the replacement value of these buildings is extremely high. Yeah. And so, I think we acquired this building at maybe $80 or $90 a square foot. Yep. And you know what? It had to be that number in order to make this project work. This is a 1 step forward, 2 step back project. Everything costs more. Demolition arguably can cost half as much as the actual formwork that would be required on a new construction building. So, sorry, I'm a bit all over the place. I get excited.
There's a lot to it.
But the Calgary example was the purchase price was $70 a square foot. Before the city added their $70 a square foot subsidy. So your cost base was zero. It's effectively you get the $70 when you complete the project.
You get the liability.
And it sounded great. It was a no-brainer. So a lot of people acquired office buildings. Coincidentally, we just got a call last week of another person that wants to sell one of these projects that they were approved with grant funding because they're scared of doing the project.
Yeah.
Right? It is, or a lot of people, there's a handful that are doing it really well there and they're niche down on it, but it can be dangerous. It can be dangerous. Oftentimes, a developer does one and doesn't continue.
Yeah.
Because they've
like I could have just built on a subdivision.
So much to learn.
Pad ready.
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So reverse engineering your value, like, do you just basically get an understanding of what the form work would be and say, well, that is my hard cap on the project? Because at the end of the day, if I were to build it new, whatever my form work would cost, if I'm worst case scenario only able to salvage the shell of this building, what is that kind of really raw rationale there? Or how did you?
Yeah, we would do early. We would do so. I mean, I guess it's somewhat simple math, but essentially, there's a value on the building today for going in price, and you're buying something existing, and then it's really having the ability to create a Class D budget to really understand, is this viable or not? And so, new construction is a lot easier. Call your friend, where are you at per square foot, per suite, per whatever. These buildings, it doesn't work that way. One of the biggest horror stories I have of these projects is our blind spot was a parking garage. And we had an engineer look at a rotten area of concrete in the soffit of a parking garage. And we put $150,000 price tag on that and carried that in our budget.
Is that here at the front that you're showing me?
No, this is a project in downtown Dartmouth. But it cost us almost $3 million in the end. We jackhammered out the majority of this rotten parking garage. So if you're not prepared for those kind of surprises, and I mean, we had a professional opinion on this crack. So you gotta be so careful.
You had something with an elevator shaft too at the lofts, didn't you? Crazy elevator shaft.
Well, we couldn't get machinery in the building to over excavate the hoistway for the elevator because it has to go below grade. So we were already in a basement and we had to go another 8 or 9 feet. So we were already in 10 feet below bedrock. So we had to go another 8 feet below bedrock with a very sizable pit, and it had to be done by hand.
Oh,
so I've seen a lot of crazy stuff.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then that took 4 months of jackhammers with 4 guys.
It's always the line items that get you. I was talking to someone who I won't go in, like they're getting into like major scale property management from a affordability thing, and so it's all great when you have the line items. And I know you now have you do all your property management in house. We're not going to get into property management here, but it's a different beast. It's all fun and sexy to build the building. Property management is a slog.
It's a customer complaint center.
Yeah. Oh God, that's well put. But this is their whole business, and they have a bunch of really well-intentioned people. And then it's like someone tries to kill someone in the building, and another person throws himself off the roof, and you're like, we didn't have those in line items. It's like you sure don't, and you just don't know what's going to come up in the line item. So you must need a lot of cushion,
a lot of contingency. Yeah. That's why. But this is happening fast. When you're buying these buildings, you don't have 6 months to figure it out.
Yeah,
you have 90 days. So you need to have the team and the skill set to go in. It's the Navy SEAL team that goes in and dissects this thing, right? From every division of the budget. And
how are you handling these things early on? Because I've say like right now, I got hit by a very unexpected thing that's costing me $1 million, and it's like completely took the wind out of my sails. Like it was a punch in the face. Right? Everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face, and I didn't really have a plan for getting punched in the face.
Right.
And like as you're talking, I'm like, shit. If I'm going to continue in this world,
especially with that very punchable face you have,
this very punchable face, it's just going to keep happening. Like,
yeah, and they come like we're talking about a big building here, and I don't know your entire audience, but there's a variety of young first-time developers all the way through to season, I'm sure, and those blind spots appear on all projects.
Yeah,
right. It could be your services coming into a building on a duplex, or you bought this thing thinking you could do X, and all of a sudden you need to do Y, and it's $35,000. It throws the whole project.
Yeah,
and to come out of a project with a wash, sucks.
Yeah,
I've been there. In my early days, but I've learned to be more patient, and it's so easy to fall in love with projects and opportunities. But you also hear, don't buy the shoes at the mall, go home for 2 days, and if you're losing sleep over them, go back.
Yeah.
I compare the same analogy to real estate in some ways.
Yeah.
But luckily it's not just me. I can roundtable this stuff, and we can beat it up for days, and that's how we win in this space right now, I guess.
So I don't know how much you can talk about this, but what is your immediate pipeline here in the city? I mean, there's some things that are pretty public. You've got to, how many square feet is the building on Portland Street, that office building?
Our next office conversion project is approximately 110,000 feet.
Okay, yeah, it's a little less tall than this.
It's coincidentally enough, it's also 2 phases of a project, of a building. It's a building built in 2 phases. It's an 8-story and a 6-story tower put together.
Gotcha. And it also comes with the land. What are you doing with the land?
And it comes with a sexy piece of land in the back that we've been working with the city on establishing the density through the upzoning process and whatnot. And so that is looking like 150 to a 200 unit project in the parking lot behind the building.
And how many in the existing building?
It'll be a 75 unit conversion in the existing building, and we'll maintain the retail on the podium and ground floor, and we will have 1 to 2 floors of health focused commercial office.
Gotcha. When do you think you're going to start that? Like, what's the
de-tenanting? We've been de-tenanting, and it sometimes takes a year. But if you can time that with your design work, they can overlap nicely. But we're starting this project in November, starting demolition in November, and it'll be an 18-month duration.
What's the trick been with de-tenanting? Has it been kind of helping them find a new space, or kind of like and getting that prepared for them to accept it, basically? A combination of all the things. It's some of them want to leave, but they're trapped by the lease. Yeah. Some of them need new space. Yeah.
It's about having relationships with other brokers, understanding what else is out there, helping them get out of their lease, just being creative and open to ideas with how they can vacate or stay. Sometimes we move them around. They don't want to leave the building. They're in love with the building.
Yeah.
But they want better space because oftentimes the landlord is not
been willing
invested
to invest
in the tenant.
Space. Yeah.
And so we want our buildings to be the best they can be from a design and experience standpoint. So if we can help the commercial tenants and help them stay and it makes sense for both, we'll do that.
Further to the pipeline, where do you see, I guess, sidewalk going, or like, I'm assuming that's the main driver. Bruno and Black and Brew, I don't know if you intend to continue to grow those, or more so Black and Brew is going to serve as sidewalk and Bruno will be a construction arm. But again, I think sidewalk's probably the main focus. But where do you see that future going? Like, what's your vision that you're really excited about to grow to or get to?
Sure. Yeah. So what we talked about, purpose and values and what drives the organization and why do people want to jump on board with us?
Yeah.
But we really believe that, the purpose that drives us is that we're boldly building a better city. So every project that we complete, whether it's a restaurant for a client, Bruno Builders, all the way through to converting an old office building that we're in today, or changing what we're changing in downtown Dartmouth, they are all contributing in a big way to the city.
Yeah.
It's a restaurant that wouldn't have been there otherwise. It's people that wouldn't have been on that block otherwise. So, but doing that in a transformative way that is memorable, that is identifiable, that people can get behind and say, I was part of that. Yeah. That's really special. So we're driven by that. We want our 10-year big picture is $1 billion in neighborhood improvements.
Wow.
And that's the way we measure our purpose. That is the way we are making a difference for the city. So
not a door count.
Not a door count. It's a total asset pool value, as well as all of the revenue that runs through the other companies to actually make projects happen around the city.
Yeah.
We're building really wonderful projects around the city, a variety of projects. Bruno Builders works on 12 to 15 sites at a time. We don't own any of those, but we are making a change to the city.
I went by that one on John Street, that really cool one there. I hadn't seen it since it was done, and I ran into the owner outside, and I was just like, man, that looks super cool. That's a really neat project.
Funky color.
Back. What's that?
Funky color.
Yeah. With like the teal and stuff. It's super cool.
Spectacular. It looks like it was just dropped in that neighborhood. Yeah, really great client and owners. They're actually the architects and designers of the home. And so it was a really great experience. We really work with owners directly, as sounds cliche, but as partners. It's a very intimate relationship, and we work best with the owners and operators of these organizations and homes. And so our that is the big hairy audacious goal.
Yeah.
But right now our pipeline at Sidewalk, we are working through. We calculate values based on assets under management. So it would either be assets we own today or the finished value of that said asset. So if a building's worth 60 million or 80 million, that would contribute to that total value. So we are working through a pipeline of secured projects of about 500 million in assets when complete. So we have
this combination of land and conversion projects, basically.
Correct. Right? It's land that is yet to be developed. It's stabilized projects we've completed, but that's what we control a pathway to right now. So we have 10 projects lined up ahead of us that we are trying to execute on right now, and multiple at the same time at different phases of design or construction. We would have right now actively, we are constructing on average 300 units at a time active under construction within the group.
Wow.
And that 500 that I was referencing is about 1,500 units that we are working through executing on now that we control. But there's 4 deals on the board right now that we're looking at. So it all depends on
how those pan out.
And sticking here for the most part.
We are concentrating primarily. Downtown Dartmouth has been our love child. It was our first project of scale.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. And we really, I don't know if it's because I lived away for a long time and really didn't know much about Dartmouth, but I don't know what brought me over. I talked to so many that do not pass through there because it's just not part of their routine. They're driving back and forth to Bedford to work, and this was no different than when I started acquiring property over there. It's like, what is it? What are you doing? But you could see it no different than seeing a building with a vision. You saw a neighborhood with huge opportunity. It was just shuttered over the years.
I think like the thing about Dartmouth is always struck me as like the chance to do it right.
Mhm.
Like all the mistakes that were made
Mhm.
maybe in downtown Halifax, all the things that you would like love to do over. It was such fertile ground over in Dartmouth. It's like, wow, this is a chance to take everything that we've learned from, a half century of urban planning, because let's be honest, no one touched downtown Dartmouth for half a century
Absolutely.
for all intents and purposes. Right? Like, so
Mhm.
everything that was learned, rather than having to deal with the mistakes of half a century, there's just all the knowledge and raw potential. So I think that's super, super cool.
Yeah. It had a black eye for a long time for good reason. There's, it didn't have great stories coming out of Dartmouth, but
no, it was a little stabby for a bit there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we acquired through the black eye
It's the best time to acquire.
era, right? Yeah. And almost all off market. And I just slowly built relationships with all my neighbors, just all the neighbors. Downtown Dartmouth is one of the most geographically, lots of different reasons. I think it's one of the greatest little cities in the world for so many reasons. And I can see the vision of where that's going, what it'll be, and more people on the streets and more buildings to come. What we had to do was painstakingly help recreate the commercial, the retail experience in downtown. We had to give a reason for people to want to live there. And once we completed as much as we could do there, then the people wanted to come and live there and walk to coffee. Yeah. Right. And so that's what we're focused on now.
And it takes someone to take those risks, and not everyone makes it through. Like when I think of Founders Corner and what an ambitious project that was at that time, and then all of its great things, and for all things maybe that didn't work out well for people that did that project, putting 2F by C Cafe in that commercial space revolutionized a neighborhood. Like that simple thing, and what that did for that community, which speaks to, they had a very specific vision with that building, and they, it was an ambitious project for the time. It was ahead of its time in a lot of ways, but it's amazing. Like when you talk about creating a community or rebuilding community or giving, like, the hub feel, right? Like that's what all these areas, even down here on Barrington, like that's what it lost for so long, was that hub feel of the successful retail and commercial. It's so important. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about on the conversion side? Because I do want to get into.
You guys texting each other or like checking notes, or
I'm checking my things I wanted to work through this conversation.
I apologize. I just trying to keep an inspection on the rails here right now.
Oh God!
Wow, this is real.
Yeah. It's a live.
Can I check
live
mine?
shoot.
Yeah, I want to check.
I can imagine yours. I've been seeing guys keep like looking over the like. Is he free yet?
Yeah.
But what are your? So you're talking about bringing on hundreds and hundreds of units potentially over the next period of time. You're about to drop these. Nearly 200 units on the marketplace. There's cranes all around town. There's the changing, rates. We've been through this period of just really high rates. They're starting to come back down to earth, which is great. There seems to be a lot of wind in the sails of things to help developers, whether it's removal of the HST, all of these things. So there's all of this conflicting energy in the residential. We'll talk specifically about residential rental space. Where's your head out on all this? Obviously, you're still going balls to the wall by the sounds of it. Like, are you changing steps? Are you pivoting anything? What's your forecast? Loaded question, I know. But
yeah, well, yeah, right. If we had a crystal ball, but I would start with, real estate occurs in cycles, like many things, and what we've all experienced over the last 3 years is not going to be the case for the future. It's not realistic to think that you build anything or slap anything together and somebody's going to want to live in it. There's pros and cons in the last 3 years, right? A lot of things cost them through the roof, and I don't know if they'll ever come back from a construction standpoint, right? That sucked. Yeah. HST, yes, that's helping. That helps right now. It's at 15%. But, it comes back to the basic fundamentals of real estate. I think if you don't have a great location and great product, you may not survive any downturn that could come in the future. So what we can't answer today is the supply and demand question. The supply side, everyone's doing their darnest to develop as much housing as possible. We need to maintain the demand. Yeah. But the cost of building these buildings has never been higher. So I can't predict where that's going to go. But to make the numbers work and buy something land for retail today and for that project to be viable, it'd be difficult. Unless you buy it really well and you have in-house resources to actually help you through. You have to create the margin, the upside, create the value, as you go. But I think, are we going to have some vacancy? Are rates going to be challenged? The rental income rates? Yeah, quite likely. Will there be oversupply? I don't know. I hope not. But you need to prepare as if there was,
happen, yeah.
right? And so Halifax is a great city, one of the best. It's too small to be big. It's too big to be small. And you know what? I love that about it. COVID put us on the map. But I think there was a lot of noise and confusion around why there's so much demand, right? It was COVID. It's hard to really understand why. There's immigration happening. There's the students, and out migration of Toronto. There was downsizing because housing values went through the roof. It's just a complex amount of data to try to make sense of. But I think as that settles, we just need to ensure that we are bringing the right people here that can help contribute to our construction challenges from an immigration standpoint. I think students are the reason why Halifax is an apartment rental market.
Yeah,
this doesn't exist in many cities. It's a very unique market that way. But I think we need to ensure that the students continue to come here to learn, and they're getting great educations, and that they spend money. They are contributing in a big way to our economy. This is what tens of thousands of students. This is there's so many podcast kind of topics to chat about here, but I'm confident in where things are going. This is what we do every day. I think you have to have great positioned. You have to have great location projects in great locations, and you need to have really great product where people get a feeling when they're in their building. They love to live in their space, and they're willing to pay for something different. Like, this is an industrial loft style conversion. Yeah. This is not cookie cutter, Larry Utech, get it built, big patio, big kitchen and great room. This is a completely different market. Yeah. This is a young professional looking for something different. Yeah, that likely doesn't have a car.
I wasn't even going to bring up the parking ratio, but what is your parking ratio here?
I'm trying to do the mental math, but
1 for 10,
it's 6 per 5.
Yeah, like 7%. Yeah, so you got 12 stalls for 170 units. Yeah. I mean, these are the things that the city is going to have to work out here downtown. We have to work out our transit system. We know that we have to work out our sewer line. The one thing about only having 12 parking spots down there, that's going to be a godsend when some of these people are pumping out entire parking garages, which they're going to have to do down here. I'm convinced of it. There's already some flooding down here on these streets, and I think that's going to get worse. But
Mother Nature's scary thing, right? Yeah. And we're not in control of her and what we've experienced the last 3 years.
Shows what's going on, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
We need to figure out how to just
assume it's going to maintain or get worse, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, talking about the feeling. This is where I had some people who they have duplexes, and they've been asking me a lot about rental rates and all these things. And I always answer people, the first thing is to make sure you have a nice unit and a nice building, right? People are like, oh well, what's how come so and so can rent a unit and I can't, or whatever. It's like, well, have a really nice unit. That's the first thing. If you have a good product, people will want to rent it. It'll keep you competitive. The other thing is, the reason flats tend to be very successful, even in down rental markets, is because flats have always given people the sense of it is their home. And that's because you have things like green spaces, or you have, your own private entrance, little things like that make people nest, for lack of a better term. They stay longer, they take more pride in the space, and they seem to always be easy to rent. So that means there is a subjective emotional component to renting. And people who build en masse often don't think about that. They just kind of say, because they've been spoiled by, if I build it, they will come and they'll be lucky to be here. I think as the market gets more competitive, you are going to need to, create the feeling of place or space, or whatever these urban planners or, liberal arts people would say, right? But you do need that. It needs to feel like a community as the market gets more competitive. I think that'll be a key thing.
Yeah, you got to play up on your strengths. So you mentioned it, duplex, flat, green space. That's interesting, right? How many are really investing in the green space of a set of flats? Probably almost no one.
Nobody.
Could you have a fire pit? Could you put some furniture? Those are the things that will differentiate. You got to play I don't have green space. Can't play that. Nor can we afford to over amenitize our buildings.
No,
right?
You can't.
But
you can do it with little things like this. Is not the same horizontal white subway tile that I see at every place. It's a different cabinet selection. I love the polished concrete. I love the exposed industrial. Not that people haven't done this before, but you have a clear vision of what it's going to be. The place over in Dartmouth with the hotel conversion, how that had a really interesting common area space. Is that something that the tenants have really embraced? Like it's kind of almost like the old lobby atrium sort of vibe there. How did that all turn out?
Yeah, so it has an 8-story open atrium. The vision there was to create an active, energetic, almost hotel lobby vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't completed or activated that yet. It's still the vision. The challenge is the retail market is really tough right now.
Yeah.
And so not only do you have to find an incredible operator that is actually going to have followers and bring traffic, you also have to, for the most part, build out this space.
Right.
So, and we could build out the space and get a great operator and it could still fail.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough time to realize some of our visions with our projects. And trust me, the biggest developers in the city are facing the same challenges. There's just, again, it comes back to population, foot traffic, revenue for the province. All of those things need to work. People need to be on the street spending money, and we're just coming out of a really dark time. We've had a couple of our ground floor retail tenants fail, and it just sucks. And we've worked with them and we've helped each other as much as we could. And property tax for a small retail tenant can be thousands on top of the rent.
Yeah.
If it's a triple net lease.
This is the tricky thing. I think commercial tax is one example of municipalities cutting off their nose to spite their face, where it's like, you don't understand that when someone goes in and beautifies a space or redevelops a building, it's all fantastic. But the nature of triple net leases is that immediately that lift in value is going to be passed on to the commercial tenant, who is quickly going to be squeezed out of that space. And then you lose the vibrancy of the neighborhood, which means you lose all the other, you're trying so desperately to get $10,000 extra from a commercial tenant, you being the municipality charging this commercial tax goes to them, that you lose all of the other income. Like it's so short-sighted.
Look at the impact, only because we are lucky enough to own so much in downtown Dartmouth and invest so much there. You unplug and that's a very curated system and family of companies and owners that are down there. You unplug one or two, it's literally impacting the fabric of that neighborhood.
Totally. Yeah.
It sets back a neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's not just a building. Yeah. Right.
It's so short-sighted, the amount they charge for commercial property tax. It's ridiculous.
Talked about that before. It's just, if they could eliminate corporate tax, it would actually have a massive benefit.
Yeah. It's literally, for the audience that doesn't know, a commercial tenant pays 4 times the property tax that a residential does.
Yeah. Insanity. The commercial property tax bills are out of sight. It blows my mind every single time I see one and or have to pay one.
We have a little parking lot, $6,000 a month in property tax. And we lose money already just on the parking income we can generate off it. We have another building that has 3 tenants in it. It's $6,000 a month in property tax.
It's $2,000 a tenant. Just the property tax. Doesn't include insurance, the actual building, any operational maintenance, nothing.
Yeah. So talking about rent caps and et cetera, this is an example of the costs that have gone through the roof and continue to. Everything continues to increase. It just makes it harder for projects to work and harder for tenants to survive. Yeah. And property owners too.
And then you lose your tax base moving forward because you get these vacated downtown cores, which is terrible. If you look at city's success, like its ability to thrive, if it has a wasteland for a downtown core, like that city is going to be in a world of trouble. But this is a digression.
Domino effect.
Yeah, 100%. As a run-on effect.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up, one thing I wanted to ask, I think is, again, to your point, our listeners are a mixture of young people trying to get into the marketplace, some that have a little bit going on, then we have some experienced developers, maybe more so targeting some of the younger listeners and some of the people that are trying to get into the marketplace or aspire to be like you or see you as an inspiration. I would say for myself, I find you very inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
What could you possibly pass on maybe as some advice? I know obviously there's a million things, but if there's a few pieces that you could share and say, hey, like these are things that you should really focus on and trying to develop yourself if you want to get to this position at some point in your life.
Yeah, I think it might start with what do you want it to be? Yeah. And that's not an easy question sometimes because those listeners could be software engineer, but doing this on the side, right? This could be a side hustle. It can be a full-time thing, or it could be, to be honest, it could be anything you want it to be.
Yeah.
But at different points there, it requires a different approach, right? It's going to take more of your time. You need certain size teams. You guys would know yourself. And then I would say it is about the network, the team, or the 25 most important people in your life to make these things happen. It could be your painter that you call every single time that always gets you out of the gym. It could also be your banker. Somebody told me very early, know 5 people at your bank. Until you know 5 people, you don't have a true partnership there yet.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that a long time ago, and therefore have a great relationship there today with many more than 5 people. But build those relationships and maintain those relationships early. And it starts with the agent and the insurance and the lawyer and the bank, right? It starts there. But then you also have all your trade partners you need to make projects happen. I'd also determine, like, are you going to take on the construction? The only place I ever added value, or the teams added value, is through construction.
Yeah.
Buying it right, knowing how to accomplish the highest and best use.
Yeah.
But also it's the construction piece. If you can manage your margin, otherwise you're kind of handing over that risk to somebody else.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy to build a construction company. So, how to get going? I often get that question. What do I do? I've done, I've got a duplex. I've got I got 2 duplexes.
Yep.
What do I do next? How do I create lift? How do I generate real value? Like, I'm all in on this. I'm all in on that now. What do I do? And this is where the crossroads come to say, well, because it's so easy, you eventually go all in. Where does the money come from? You either are okay with that and it's good, or you get brave and bold and start knocking on doors and say, here's my plan. Do you or anyone you know want to participate?
Mm-hmm.
The better the track record you have, the better the returns you can generate, the more people are going to want to jump on. So if I was to start again, I would be finding that single family home, and I would be looking at highest and best use. Can I do 8 units on this site? Can I do 4? I've seen this around the city a few times. I'm like, that's smart. I've jacked a number of houses in my days.
Yeah.
But they're, jacking it and, increasing the height by 3 or 4 feet, adding a unit, doing a little addition on the back, whatever it takes. But, if your cost base, if you can generate that margin, you're buying at 600, you're into it for 1.2 and it's worth 1.6, you get your initial capital out.
Yeah.
Perfect. Go to the next one. I think that's a hidden gem in the rules right now, is
especially with all the upzoning now.
Oh my
There's
God.
a ton of homes you can do 4 units up to 8 units.
100%. There's also some stuff, if you understand the heritage designation of your conversions, that you can do to a heritage property or add density on a lot of a heritage property.
Yeah.
Which again, one of the things you said you learned early on was that, like understanding the planning and the zoning and the bylaws and the code and all that stuff, getting, nerd out on that
Get
stuff
educated.
is super valuable.
Nerd out, talk to architect firms, get studies done, spend a couple $1,000 here and there. That's all it takes sometimes to say, what can I do here?
Yeah.
A lot of people go in circles on that, and the $2,000 is too much money.
I know, it's crazy.
Anyway, to each their own. But I think that's a real opportunity to buy single family homes and add density. It's a no brainer, and you can start small.
But I think you raised a good point about trying to figure out what it is that you want to do, because I know I've struggled with this a little bit. Early on, my goal was like, okay, I'm going to buy 1 property a year for 10 years. I'll have 10 properties at the end, and I'll just be right as rain. I'll be chilling out. And I realized kind of after about 4 or 5, I was like, that sort of approach doesn't make sense, because I'm only able to buy one small little thing at a time. Made more sense to spend a few years on a project, but buy something bigger. And that was always like, well, I want 100 doors. And, my vision of what I wanted to do has changed a couple times through that process. And now I'm at that point again where I'm like, I don't know what I want to do next, quite frankly. But I think having that in mind, because everyone, like, real estate's sexy, right? So everyone's like, I want to be in the game. It's like, well, what does that look like for you? Like, are you quitting your job?
Right.
Because if you're not, there's only so far in the game you're going to be able to get. Also, do you want to do this because you want to make some fast cash on some stuff? Do you want to build, personal worth? Because there's a lot of low-key millionaires around the city who have just bought 5 or 6 single-family homes over the years, paid them down, and now are multimillionaires, right? And they have cash flow and they have equity. That's not a terrible model. Is it sexy? No. Does it make headlines? No. But that can be a great thing for some people. I've had buddies be like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And like, I know who their wife is. And I'm like, bro, you're not doing any of that shit. She's not going to let you, right? So, what might make sense to you is hack your host down, or just throw your money in a REIT. And like, there are other ways to be active in real estate or to lend money, things like that. So I think it is important to kind of know what you want it to be. Like, I can tell you like building businesses and teams. So that makes sense for your vision. But if you do not like to be someone who has a bunch of people reporting to them, maybe that's not your vision, right?
and it's okay to not be able to answer the question fully, but you should spend time on
Think
what
about
it is you want it to be, the big picture, like what could this be? What am I capable of now? What does another phase of this look like? There's some pretty big questions earlier there, to answer. But once you do, it makes things easier. Things can fall into place.
Start the mission.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. Like, get the deal that you have in front of you and work it and see how it feels.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with your plan. If I'm going to
Yeah.
buy 10 homes in 10 years and have 10 million in wealth and let it pay down, and I'm retired and living in Florida, but it changes, right? Because you're like, oh, well, I got to refinance that to move that to here. And this just came across my desk. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I didn't pay anything down in 10 years.
Yeah, there's that too.
Right.
Yep.
But I had, but now I have,
base. And it's like, okay,
but now you might have 10 houses, but you might have 3 pieces of land and another. So it's, there's so many, it's like we predict as much as we can, but it's just not that easy. Anyway, this was fun. I appreciate you guys.
We really appreciate you coming on. This
Yeah.
was an amazing project. I don't know if we talked about it much, but it was unbelievable to see. Those penthouses are super, super cool, but all the units are amazing. I'm amazed by how much glass there is. That's what I like. There's a lot of windows, a lot of openings.
I'm sure we'll do that. Oh, sorry. I'm sure we'll do some specific content at some point from our own marketing team around the penthouse, for the penthouse marketing, and just for the listeners, we've the top 2 floors of the building. The elevator didn't reach the top floor of this building. Yeah. So from a code perspective, that's an inaccessible floor. Mm-hmm. So what we did was combine the top 2 floors of the building to be 2-story penthouses and cut stairwells inside each unit. But the ceiling heights of these units are between 14 and 16, 17 feet. So when you combine the two, it's north of 30 feet when you look through an opening.
They're bad.
Are there any 2-level penthouses in the city?
I don't know, because the cost benefit's not there from a developer standpoint, right? We were forced to do them here and made everything else work around it. That's another thing that's great about these buildings that we fall in love with is you end up in these unique situations that you wouldn't otherwise. So, and what comes from it is like this incredible character that you can't fake. You can't fake it. It's like you naturally have these character defining elements that are there and you work with, and we try to celebrate all of those in these buildings and work and then work back from that. Yeah.
No, it's super cool. I'm excited to see it. And
you see the church, the United Church we bought in the North End, which is, we have 2 heritage projects on the go right now, but we essentially bought the Halifax Explosion kind of memorial site church in the North End, Dartmouth, and our plan there is to rehabilitate this church. And the Heritage is working with us in the community to add density to offset, the cost of fixing this church, which is dilapidated. It's about a block from the Hydrostone. It's the United.
You said North End Dartmouth. You mean North End Halifax?
North End Halifax.
Yeah, I know the one you mean. Yeah.
I don't know if I made any sense in this podcast. I also feel like we scratched the surface on a lot of things.
We did.
I don't know if I even answered a lot of your
questions. No, it's the nature of it, right? Like it's there's a lot of components to it. But we'll also provide kind of some links to, and it's worth following Sidewalk Red on Instagram and when
and Black and Brew and Bruno Builders. Follow our family of companies and see what we're up to.
Yeah. When are these going to be leasing?
We're starting our leasing program in the next couple of months, the marketing in the new year. So May we'll be tenanting the building. Yeah.
Nice. Which
Which is funny, right? Because we're sitting in almost finished suites.
Yeah. So you can tenant this one right now.
But that's the reality of these buildings, right? We'll have active construction in a variety of areas.
Yeah.
The penthouses are a scope of work. The floors 9 to 2 are a scope of work. The retail is scope of work.
It's also like, I've always tried to get tenants in there early as possible, and then they don't have as good of a experience. Yeah. And it's always like you're chasing after it. Like tomorrow I have to get everyone to move out of the parking garage so I can paint the lines. So it's asking them to just park outside for 24 hours so I can paint the lines. And they're like, why didn't you paint the lines earlier? It's like, I couldn't. I had stuff down there. And then, self-closing elements on doors that are already installed. So it's like, we got to go into your unit at 8 o'clock in the morning with self-closing thing. There's always that stuff working around tenants.
I think that's just a reality of where we are today with
getting
trade availability, resourcing. Like there's going to be something. So it's just about having an understanding of patience early and work together to get through those things. It's no different than in big buildings that were just built on the waterfront.
Yeah. Right on. All right. Well, this was great. Thanks so much for making the time, man. I always enjoy talking with you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
And thanks everyone for listening. I mentioned this last time, but if you're listening, make sure you share it on your social media. It just helps people to know that it's out there. So
Thanks, guys.
Share it up.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.